Ladies and gentlemen, this year's Walter Cronkite Award for Excellence in Journalism recipient, Christiane Amanpour.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much indeed. The President of the University, Arizona State University. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. To the great Dean Callahan and to everybody here and to all of you, to the students who I spoke to this morning and who I watched put on their wonderful news broadcast last night, to ABC 15, who I came to join on set at 3 o'clock yesterday with Susan and Rebecca, and to everybody here who've made me feel so welcome in these last few hours that I've been here. And also to my good friend Samuel Burke, who is a Walter Cronkite School alumnus and is here supporting me as well, and one of my producers when I was doing Amanpour at CNN. It is fantastic to be in Arizona. I have to tell you, this is a beautiful state, as you all know, and I have had the opportunity when I was back in CNN in 1986 to come here as a tourist, actually. I came with two friends, we took a car, we landed in Phoenix, and we drove all over your fantastic state, not just the Grand Canyon, but everywhere. And I saw the painted desert, the petrified forest, and do you know what? It was the first time I really felt kind of at home in the United States, because the relief and the temperature and everything about it reminded me very much of my childhood growing up in Iran. So it was really a feeling of being home here. I know that doesn't sound exactly what you want to hear in terms of the politics and the confrontations, but just the pure beauty and the desert nature of it made me feel at home. And to see such a beautiful part of the United States so early in my visit, my stay in the United States. And very sadly, the last time I came here was earlier this year when that terrible shooting rampage happened in Tucson, and Gabby Giffords was injured, so many others were injured, 6 people were killed, and it really crystallized some of the worst of what can happen when situations get out of control like that. And we immediately decided to bring our broadcast here. We heard about it obviously on the Saturday, and we immediately got on a plane, and we were the only Sunday program of the networks to come here and report what had happened and try to shed some light nationally, because obviously you all were doing your job for all the viewers and readers of Arizona, but we wanted to make sure that people around the country knew what had happened here. And subsequently, we came back the following week, the following Sunday, and did a town hall, which we hoped would not be something that was gratuitously plumbing the tragedy of what happened, but something that would try to heal, that would try to let all the people involved, not just those who were caught up in the melee, but those who were also the first responders, the law enforcement, the medical, the politicians. And that, I think, from everything we heard from those who took part, did go some way at least to allowing people to speak and to pour out their emotions, and to, even at that early stage, try to take the first tentative steps towards rebuilding, a moment that had been shattered in a community. So Arizona means a lot to me, and coming here and being awarded this honor is truly something remarkable. I'm so humbled, not just because of how incredible a school this is, not just because of the amazing legacy of Walter Cronkite, but because I see the students with my own eyes living up to that legacy and living up to the best that this profession and this craft and this way of life, which is journalism, has to offer and holds for them in store. To watch them and to be in the control room putting on the program last night, which I know they do every night, and to see and to know that it's actually broadcast around on the public television service, and to know that the Cronkite School, I think you told me, is the only Arizona station that has a Washington bureau, and to see them, grab Governor Brewer last night was really, really interesting and invigorating, and gives me a huge amount of hope and faith in the future of this great profession. Because this is a great and noble profession. We've heard a little bit this afternoon about why journalism is so important, about why we are called, in this country anyway, the fourth estate. because without a strong and rigorous, independent, fair, free class of journalists, I don't believe that any society can be truly healthy, can be truly empowered, because it is really the journalists who are among other groups in society, but we are the caretakers of, I think, a public service and a public good. And I believe that when we go into this profession, we do it, of course, because we want to have a good job, because we want to have an exciting job, because we want to think that we have a life of purpose, of meaning, of mission, of passion. But also, this really is a public service. And in all of my travels abroad, and in the 2+ decades that I've been doing this, I have seen that in the emerging democracies around the world, in some of the non-democracies, frankly, those countries struggling to get out of under the yoke of dictatorship and authoritarianism, it is often journalists, in fact, more than usual, it is journalists who are on the cutting edge of reform and who are often ahead of the curve and really pushing reform, pushing political developments, pushing the freedom agenda, and being willing to stand up and put themselves on the line for something that is so critical and so vital. In a developed democracy, without journalism, without great journalism, without people who are really committed to it, you can have any number of abuses that would go unrecorded, unearthed, and sort of the country and the civilization and the community would be so much poorer. And you can name any number of things that have happened in the United States which have been exposed by journalists. Walter Cronkite, as everybody knows, was a phenomenal, unique, exemplary, extraordinary man of great credibility and great integrity. The reason why people trusted him and called him Uncle Walter was not because he was a celebrity who was sitting in this important chair at CBS for so long, but it was because of everything that he had learned and everything that he had seen and witnessed and put his life on the line and put his integrity on the line and put his intellectual courage on the line to question what his government was doing, to witness what the world was doing, and to be able to bring that to the table when finally he moved from being a great reporter to perhaps the greatest anchor that this country and any other country has ever known. The man who was so trusted and so beloved. And you know, I don't need to tell you, and it's actually embarrassing, I don't like to say it, but these days journalists, unfortunately, are very low when it comes to people's public esteem. So it is amazing to remember a time when journalists, embodied by Walter Cronkite, and before him Edward R. Murrow, were the real paragons of the society in which they found themselves. I said, and I mean it, that journalism is a great profession, that I believe it is a human right and a human imperative to be fully informed as a citizenry, and I believe that it is, you cannot, as a society, be fully developed without full access to information. It is a great and it is a noble endeavor. It is what we do, a sacred public trust, and it always does, if it's done well, serves the public interest. So I'm a real believer in the power of good and that this is a force for good in our world. I wonder where the world would be without the great journalism that has, over the years and over the decades, uncovered so much injustice, so much corruption, cruelty, and inhumanity. As I said, where would we be if there is not a press that's on the cutting edge of everything, whether it's emerging democracies, as I said, or whether in the past, here in this country, the civil rights movement, desegregation, and so much more. And I will give you a word of warning. When journalism is not fully engaged and is not fully active, you can also have terrible results. I remember, because I was part of the reporting class at the beginning in 2002 and 2003, when the Bush administration was leading up to the war in Iraq, there unfortunately was not that tipping point of journalism asking the questions over and over again. Why? What is the evidence? Why are you doing it? It was the lack of rigorous questions that I believed allowed a war to be declared with virtually no opposition. And I think, for instance, when I look out in places like Rwanda, it was because in 1994 there was not a tipping point of journalists out there who were every day bringing the tragedy that was unfolding there, the genocide that was unfolding there, to public attention, to the attention of the greatest country in the world, the United States. And therefore, the US did not intervene, nor did the rest of the international community, and they let it happen. So that is the dark side of when we don't act. The great side of when we do act is you uncover Watergate, you uncover corruption, you reset the relationship between politics and the people. Overseas, when we were in Bosnia and we spent weeks and years and months committed to telling the truth of that story, it was late, but in the end, the international community acted. The United States gathered together a great coalition, and within a very short period of time, stopped the bombing, stopped the genocide, launched rigorous diplomacy that created the peace process. My late friend, Richard Holbrooke, was in charge of that diplomacy. And from November 1995, when the Dayton Accords were signed, to this day, there is peace in that region, brought by the United States of America and the allies which it was able to gather and bring to this very important ideal, to stand up for the rights of people, to stand up for the international humanitarian imperative that we will not allow the gross violation of humanitarian law, the gross violation of international norms, such as genocide, to occur on our watch. So we have so much power for good and also for bad when we don't act and when we don't really get out there and do our jobs. You saw in that video, to be honest, I don't really know how to follow that video, and I thank you so much for putting that together. I think you told me the students did it. This is an amazing, amazing thing. I mean, not just because it's me, but it was just so nice to see it. And you put it together so professionally. It was really, really wonderful. But it also highlights, of course, the danger that so many journalists put themselves in. And I'm also on the board of the Committee to Protect Journalists. And the sad fact is that today, the number of foreign correspondents and foreign journalists, people who work in their own countries abroad, the number of them being deliberately silenced, in other words, killed, is just increasing every year. And the most alarming statistic, which I to this day can't even bear to hear and to repeat, is that unlike with the rest of the population, where illness and disease is generally the leading cause of death, in the journalism community, it is deliberate. People are trying to shut down the messenger, to shut out the truth, and they're taking it out on the journalists. And therefore, it's even more imperative that we realize how incredible a profession this is and how we all band together and really help each other and help our colleagues who labor in these trenches overseas without the protections of the First Amendment, without living in countries which do not have the rule of law and who think nothing of killing, imprisoning, torturing journalists, and who, when they do so, do it with impunity, because not having the rule of law, there is generally very little recourse to try to get journalists out of prison or insist that they operate within a legal framework of opportunity. So it's very, very difficult. Jefferson said that a strong and robust democracy, even this one, needs an informed citizenry. It needs independent journalists of integrity and vigor who are not cripplingly cynical, who are committed to reporting, as I said, the facts without fear nor favor, and who insist on asking the rigorous questions and on holding power accountable. And there is nothing more uncomfortable than sitting in front of somebody in power, whether it's a city official, whether it's a national official, whether it's a world leader, whoever it might be. It is not easy for any journalist at any level to sit down and ask the tough and rigorous questions. There's always an element of fear. And what we have to do is control our fear, manage our fear, and realize that we are speaking on behalf of all our viewers and all our citizens who put their trust and their hope in us when they want questions answered and fundamental truths told. So I do think that it takes a huge amount of courage and effort, not just the kind of courage and effort that many of our colleagues display when they go out into the field, but right here on a daily basis to speak truth to power, no matter the level of power, is an incredible, important thing that we have to really stick to doing, realize why we're doing it. It's not about us, it's about getting the questions for our community. And I think that one of the other things is we should never be confused into mistaking dissent for disloyalty. You know, many times when we try to stand up for the truth, particularly in times of great national trauma, for instance, in the post-9/11 era here in the United States, there was this feeling that you're either with us or with them. And that was not just told to foreign governments who are harboring terrorists. It wasn't just told to extremist groups who might seek to do this country and its people harm and other people as well. But journalists, unfortunately, internalized that as well and forgot that actually it's important to always ask the rigorous questions and never be intimidated and never be bludgeoned into thinking that you're being in some way disloyal or unpatriotic. It is the highest form of patriotism and professional duty to ask the toughest questions at the toughest times, even in a situation where your country, your people have been dealt incredible harm. Because if we don't ask those questions then, any number of mistakes, bad directions, wrongly thought out, not enough thought out policy can be taken. So we've spoken a lot about the heroes of our profession, of Walter Cronkite. I mentioned Edward R. Murrow, and of course his picture was up there in that report. He is our patron saint, and in 1958, the year I was born, Edward R. Murrow said this about what was then a newfangled invention, which was television. I'm sure all the students know it by heart. He said about television that this instrument can teach, it can illuminate, and yes, it can even inspire, but it can do so only to the extent that humans are determined to use it to those ends. Otherwise, it's merely a bunch of lights and wires in a box. And he went on to say that there is a great and perhaps decisive battle to be fought against ignorance, intolerance, and indifference. And this weapon of television can be so useful. And that is, I think, sums up our mission, to be useful, to do no harm, to be useful to our communities, because we wield very, very important and powerful platforms, and all the more so as the explosion of information is just happening exponentially every time we look around. And I genuinely believe that as all of you, particularly the students, are grappling with this new media world that we inhabit now, with these new technologies, with the social media, with the proliferation of platforms, it is still, as a news president said many, many years ago, it is still about the people. It's about the people who wield this platform. It's about the people who wield these microphones, the pens, the editorships, the cameras, the whole gamut of what we call journalism in print, radio, television, online, wherever it may be. It is still people who are the gatekeepers, and therefore each and every one of us needs to concentrate and remember that there's so much information that's bombarding us all the time. But does that necessarily mean that there is so much knowledge that's coming with it? Or is information just coming at us without being able to decipher and discern what is important, what is not, what is real news, what is not? And I think also, sometimes, and this is one of the perils, I think, in this otherwise phenomenal technological revolution that we're undergoing right now, one of the perils is that one can be, if one's not careful, directed to the avenues and the lanes and the highways that you think you know already and that you want to. In other words, reinforcing your own views and your own ideas about things, instead of also seeking out information that comes from organizations or people or entities who you don't necessarily agree with. That you need to know the story of the other, whether that's in reporting whatever we do, whether it's the economy, whether it's politics, whether it's science and technology, whether it's war and peace, whatever it might be, we as journalists are obligated not just to stay in our own narrow lanes, which is becoming easier and easier, because even when you Google now with all the algorithms and all of this stuff, they move you into the lane that they think that you want to be in because of your past research and your past activity online. So I think we have to be really careful to always understand that we need to know the story of the other. We need to know what other people are thinking, because if we don't, we're only half armed, we're only half enabled. So I think that's a very crucial point to make at this time, for me anyway, because I see even when I do research for interviews on Sunday morning, sometimes I can see that too much stuff that's the same is coming into my inbox, and I need to make an effort to go out and read and access, whether it's video or print, of the different thoughts and the different thinking on those issues. When I joined ABC 18 months ago, after 27 plus years at CNN, the imperative was for me to try to expand my mission. And my mission has been to try to bring international news, international stories, stories from around the world to an American audience, as well as to the global audience, which I used to on CNN International as well. And I wanted to bring that to this incredible piece of real estate, which is Sunday morning television on the broadcast networks. It is one of the last remaining bastions of real estate for serious viewers who want to know what's going on at home. They want to know what's happening in their political life. They want to know, you all want to know what's happening in the economy. They want to know what's going on inside the US, of course. And I wanted to try to bring an added sort of global perspective, particularly at this time, because as we can see, the economy, which I'm on a very fast learning curve towards trying to master, is something that isn't just here, but it's over there as well. And what happens in Europe, when they catch a chill, it can spread to a pretty bad sniffle over here, and vice versa. When the United States catches a chill, it can cause pneumonia overseas in just about any endeavor. So I strongly believe, particularly at this time, 2011 coming on to 2012, with a very important election on the horizon, that as much as we need to know about what's going on in our own backyard, and as much of a crisis as we have to grapple with these days, the economic crisis, the infrastructure crisis, the unemployment crisis, the partisan crisis in Washington, that I hear from viewers and people all the time want to know what it's going to take to get their political elected leaders to work for them, to come up with solutions to these incredibly big problems that we all face. And one of the things that I like to do is use my ability in this medium to try to point towards solutions. We always hear that media tends to focus too much on the heat and not enough on the light. Well, I genuinely try so hard to bring light to many of these incredible and often intractable situations that we find in, because I do believe strongly that there are solutions, but the solutions require, again, listening also and accepting the other. Both sides need to accept that perhaps it won't be on the left or on the right, perhaps it will be in the center, perhaps it will and has to be a mixture of politics and commitment from both sides of the aisle. And certainly I have learned, I have seen, I've experienced abroad, and I'm seeing it here now, that the huge issues that this country needs to grapple with, the whole idea of the entitlements, the whole real try to get the government under control, is something that will not be able to happen with one party alone. It has to be both parties coming together. And I'm also seeing something so interesting, that for the first half of last year, let's say up until quite recently actually, the conversation in this country was so much about cuts and getting the deficit under control, which is very important. But again, it has to happen in a bipartisan way, otherwise it is not going to happen, and it's just going to be tinkering around the edges. But today, the conversation is changing somewhat and shifting somewhat to another alarming trend in this country, which I never thought I would have to report on because I see this so much overseas, and that is the incredible income inequality, the incredible gap between people on different ends of the employment and payment scale, the harsh pressures that the middle class is under in this country, and the general sense of injustice that people feel. And I think that coupled, you've got now two amazing, huge narratives going on in this country right now. And it's a fascinating, fascinating thing to be able to report and try to uncover and to try to see where the solutions might be. You know, I tried to tell my son, and you saw that picture of my son, you heard my producer talk about how I call him, you know, every minute practically of every day. I'm not a helicopter mum, when I'm on the road. I try also to teach him about the world, about our place as individuals in this world, about what we have and therefore what we need to give back and what we need to offer to our communities, that even at his age, he needs to know that it's about justice, not just us. And he gets a little bit irritated with me because I got that slogan when I was visiting friends in Vermont, and I was at this wonderful farmer's market, and there was these beautiful stack of homemade napkins with all these great slogans on them, like the best things in life are free, justice, not just us, all those kinds of things. But he gets a little irritated with me when I keep, you know, flinging those napkins under his nose. But it's something that I feel very, very strongly about, that he learns about that from a very early age. And at his school, he's going to a very nice school in New York, and he is very fortunate to be having a great education. One of the people who came to talk to the seniors, the high school seniors, was Andrew Rosenthal of the New York Times, and he implored the students there to stay engaged, to stay informed, to really remember that we are parts of our community, and that's the only way that we're going to have strong communities. And to tell children and young people that at a very young age, I think is really, really important. So that's what I try to tell my son as well. And I was incredibly lucky in one of the most unlucky and unfortunate experiences of my lifetime. And I think many people realize their dreams by turning disadvantages, mistakes, failures, misfortunes into success, into a worldview, into their route to the future. I was growing up in Iran, and in 1979 there was the Islamic Revolution, and I was old enough to actually be able to witness it and to see it and not just be affected by it like so many of my friends were. It changed our entire family, it changed our country, it basically turfed us out of our country, but I was still fascinated enough to know that actually that is what I want to do with my life. I want to be a journalist because I want to tell those stories, those epoch-changing stories, earth-shattering stories to people, so that maybe to help broaden, you know, knowledge and therefore understanding and therefore how to deal with these things. And that's what led me to journalism. And I came to the United States, which is the greatest country in the world, and certainly when I was growing up, and this was 30 years ago, I knew, because that's what everybody told me, if you wanted to succeed and you were willing to work hard and you had a dream, come to the United States and you might just make it. Well, I didn't know that I'd make it to this platform, but I am really incredibly grateful, and I believe that I owe it to the incredible teachers that I had at my university, the University of Rhode Island, to the great community that I had around while I was working my way through school, to the first local station in Providence that hired me and gave me my first job, and then to the CNN, which gave me the opportunity to start at a startup, which it was then. I joined when it was barely 3 years old and started right at the bottom, which was at the international desk. I was a desk assistant, really, as we said, a copy girl in print parlance, the real sort of starting entry-level position, and worked my way up knowing what I wanted to do, with a clear vision and a clear sight of what I wanted to do. And yes, there were difficulties on the way. Yes, not everybody agreed that I should do what I wanted to do, but it doesn't matter. All the obstacles that come your way are the most important learning tools, I think. You know, so many people think that, oh my goodness, a mistake is, you know, it's a terrible thing and you'll never recover from a mistake. If you look at entrepreneurs, if you look at people who talk about what it takes to be successful, many of them say that you have to go through some kind of misfortune, mistake, failure, in order to get that kind of learning tool, in order to be stronger and to be able to focus on what you need to do to correct that and to move on in your chosen field and to continue up that ladder. So I strongly believe to any young people here, any students who are wondering how to do this, that it's passion, it's mission, it's a willing to sacrifice, and you have to put aside the fear of making mistakes and in fact embrace them. I came across a wonderful, wonderful quote the other day by the great author and journalistic style writer E.B. White. And he said, "I rise every morning torn between the desire to enjoy the world and the desire torn between a desire to enjoy life and a desire to improve the world, which makes planning the day very difficult." And I thought, how wonderful, because you know what, depending on what you choose to do, and there's so many professions in which you can do this, you can actually enjoy this incredible world of ours and this incredible life and do your bit to try to make a difference and try to make a better world for the greater community. And so I thought that was, you know, just a wonderful, wonderful quote that I keep with me right now. And I'd like to simply close by quoting Fred Friendly, who was a great producer at CBS, who was a great ally and colleague of Walter Cronkite and Edward R. Murrow. And he said that our job as journalists is not to make up people's minds, but it's to make the process of decision-making so painful that the only way to emerge is by thinking. So if we can do that, then we've done our job. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much indeed for having me, for honoring me, for everything that I've had here over the last more than 24 hours. The great experience it's been to be here in Arizona, to be at the university, to meet with the students and meet with so many of you. And congratulations on this wonderful, wonderful university. And thank you so much for this. It's been wonderful. Thank you.